Hi everybody, it's Thorn. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. I'm sorry it's been so long since I've made a video. I just finished my first semester of my doctoral program and I'm working full-time, and I don't know why I had the audacity to think that I could go to school full-time and do a PhD and also work full-time. I guess it was just, financial necessity, right? Like, that's why I had the audacity. Anyway, it's working so far, but we're only one semester in. So ask me in approximately 5 to 7 years how I feel. Anyway, I thought that I would come at you today with some chat about conference presentations and festival presentations, and kind of making the transition from being a festival attendee to being a presenter, because that is something that folks ask with some regularity. How do you put together a proposal or an abstract? How do you transition into being a speaker or a teacher at some of these events instead of just a participant? What does that look like? So first things first, pep talk. Absolutely, you should speak at the event. Absolutely, that is a thing that you can do. You do not need to be an author or a big name pagan, or you do not need to have tons and tons of credentials. I've been to a buttload, like what word do I want to use here, Thorn? Buttload of events, okay? I went to my first pagan festival in, I don't know, 2008? I don't know, many, like double digits years ago. Maybe it was earlier than that. And I'm not including like local community events. I'm thinking about like big festivals where I went away for days and days. And those were the first opportunities that I had to see, what we tend to call workshops rather than like presentations or lectures. I saw workshops by other pagans and other witches and other occultists about all kinds of things like how to read runes, or how to talk to gods, or the history of a particular tradition or whatever. And I was thrilled to be there, and I was not thinking at all about whether or not these people were famous. I was totally thinking about just what I could learn and how cool it was that there were so many people from different traditions with different perspectives talking about their lives and their practices, because we don't get that many places. Now that we have the internet, we have more access. But it used to be that you had to go to events to hear that sort of thing, unless you were reading in a book, in which case you're only getting authors' perspectives. I started presenting at events, Pagan Pride Days, at large festivals like camping festivals, and just kind of more like local community-based things. I started working as a presenter before I had ever written a book. Before I was known as a blogger, before I was writing for Pathos, I was presenting at conferences. In fact, the reason I got to do a lot of things subsequently, like write books and have a large online platform, was because I initially started presenting and teaching in public pagan spaces. So all that to say, don't make the mistake of thinking that you have to be like really well established in pagan or witchcraft communities in a particular way. In fact, most of the presenters that I've seen over the course of my festival community life have not been authors. They have not been prominent in like public kind of national or international ways. A lot of the best presentations I've seen have been from coven leaders, community organizers, or just really dedicated individual practitioners kind of working within their own paradigms, and just sharing their experiences. Authors and other kinds of prominent practitioners are often used as a marketing draw. It's cool to have the opportunity to interact with popular content creators or authors you've been reading for a long time. That stuff is awesome. But the majority of the teaching that goes on at your typical pagan or witch event is done by practitioners and not people who are necessarily going to be recognizable on a larger scale. And I personally think that that's awesome. Those are the presentations that I want to see, because I feel like there's a difference between what authors are popularizing kind of in like big popular spaces versus what most practitioners are actually doing on the ground. Anyway, that's a whole lot of words just to say again, you can do the thing. Do the thing. let's talk about how to do it. So just on a really practical level, most events now are going to have some kind of website where they will eventually have calls for presentations. It will often be like a Google Doc you fill out. You sometimes email organizers directly with like an abstract or some kind of proposal. But think about what events you might want to go to and start local and then branch out thinking about how much you can spend on something like travel. But figure out when their deadlines are, figure out who the organizer is, and scour their websites and social media for information about how to submit classes. Keeping in mind, too, that events have individual personalities, their organizers have particular audiences they want to cater to, so you want to think about what you are personally offering and how that is going to fit in with what they're already doing. You don't want to offer something that's going to be really out of character, maybe a tradition that isn't well represented at the event, or on a topic that's so obscure that it's not likely to attract a lot of attendees. Right, so like if I'm looking at an event that caters to heathens, I'm not going to write a workshop proposal for something that's going to appeal to Wiccans, for example. It's common for events to have annual themes, so take a poke around the website and see if the event has a theme that varies from year to year, and think about how what you might want to teach would fit in with that theme. So advice piece number 1 is to play to your strengths. Pick the thing that you are passionate about, pick the thing that you are best at, pick the thing that if you were grabbed at a bar, you could talk about for 20 minutes just because you're so excited about it. That is going to be the best place to start, especially if you're just now getting into teaching and presenting at conferences. It's cool. I do this now. I'm pretty experienced. I've done a lot of workshops, and sometimes I will choose topics now that are a little unhinged, or they're a little, they're a little weird, or there's something that I'm personally curious about in the moment. But when you're just getting started, it's often your best bet to rely on something that you already know really well. This will also take stress off when you're actually plotting out the workshop once it's been accepted. Examples might be particular divination tools, or if you have a particularly intimate relationship with a particular god or spirit, if you want to talk about the history and origins of a particular tradition that you're really knowledgeable about. Try to think broadly, because there's probably a lot of stuff that you are personally really good at that maybe you just don't even think about or notice because you're so used to being good at it. Once you've done that, the next thing you're going to do, point number 2, is think about what it is that you want people to leave with. In education, we call this backward design, is you think about the end point. Start there. What is it that you want people to know, to believe, to be contemplating when they walk out of the room when you're done talking? And you really want to be specific here. Don't make the mistake of being like, I just want them to know more about this particular deity or this particular tradition. No, specifically, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to believe? So for example, I lead a tarot workshop where the goal is to get people comfortable performing a reading for somebody else. That is the end goal. The end goal is not, oh, I want them to know about tarot, or, oh, I want them to feel like they can be a tarot reader. No, very specifically, I want every person who leaves this space to feel like they right now could sit down with another human being and give them a 3-card reading. That is the specific goal. Once you have your specific goal, you then are going to work backwards to answer the question, how are you going to get them there? So again, following with my example of my tarot course, I get them there by talking very broadly about symbolism, talking about how memory works and kind of associations work, and then getting them actually reading, like having people pair up, move around the room, and give multiple readings so that by the time the 90 minutes is up, they realize, oh shit, I just gave like 6 tarot readings and I've never read tarot before. And that helps people to feel like, oh, this is an achievable thing. You work people into actually getting where you want them to be in kind of smaller bite-sized chunks. Lecture style workshops work the same way, even though it might be a little bit less obvious. So as another example, there's another workshop that I do called This Land Is Your Land, and it's about American religious influences on contemporary witchcraft. So we're looking at things like spiritualism and New Thought, the human potential movement. We're looking at all of these things that people don't think of as witchcraft. They're not witchcraft, and yet over the last 100 or so years, 100+ years, they've had all of this impact on how we as witches operate, even if they never get mentioned in all of the books we read. So what I want audience members to leave with isn't 90 minutes of me just talking uninterrupted, but rather I want them to understand that, hey, there's actually a lot of stuff that isn't witchcraft that has had big impact on witchcraft and how we think about what we do as witches. Like, we might not think about how, like, oh, this is really like the New Thought movement kind of repackaged, like, but those things are part of our traditions, part of many of our traditions, even if we're unaware of them. So instead of speaking for 90 minutes about a whole bunch of groups that people may or may not ever remember, it's not that I want people to remember names and exact dates for things related to like Helena Blavatsky or whatever. What I actually want them to leave with is the sense that lots of things have influenced their practice, whether or not they know about them. So I'm breaking up how I'm talking about these other groups and influences, and I'm continually hammering home that thesis, that central argument, which is, hey, look at all this cool stuff and weird stuff going on in the American religious landscape that impacts witches today, even though we're usually not super aware of it. The third bit of advice here, while you are thinking about how you're going to structure your workshop, is remember your audience. Most workshops at pagan and witchcraft events are not geared for everybody, unless it's like an author event where somebody is talking generally about their body of work and people are coming to meet them. Most workshops are for specific types of people, whether that means for beginners or for members of a particular tradition, for people who are interested in a particular thing like aging or motherhood or prison ministry or something like that. Some workshops are designed for more advanced practitioners or people who feel like they're stuck in a rut. Think about who you are actually going to be talking to. Many people initially make the mistake of thinking that they are going to be talking to everybody, and overwhelmingly we are not, even if we think we are. So imagine who it is, like who is your kind of like prototype audience member, and think about what experiences that person has, what questions they probably have, where they've gotten stuck in the past, what advice they may have already received, what kinds of strategies may have already failed them. Think about that person. Do not make the mistake of talking to everybody. You are not, even if you think you are. Okay, so you've got your topic, you've got your objectives, you've got your audience all figured out. The next thing you're going to think about now that you've got all that stuff locked down is your strategy. Choosing a strategy is a combination of a couple of things. Partially, it's about what your objectives are. Some things are just going to be better suited to certain things than others. So for example, my tarot workshop, it wouldn't make sense if my objective was to make people feel confident giving a 3-card reading, my strategy should not be lecture. Instead, that's because that's not going to work. I can't talk people into being better tarot readers or feeling confident with a 3-card reading. What I have to do in that case is actually show them and do it. So that's going to be a very participatory, hands-on kind of workshop. For some things, lecture might be the way to go. Lecture works for certain topics, certain groups of people. I'm a big fan of the lecture genre, but it's not one that I personally deliver as a speaker. It's just something that I like as an audience member. You could think about, would it be beneficial to do some kind of ritual or meditation? Is there going to be some kind of craft activity? Are people going to make something? Are people going to pair up and do a particular activity together? Do I need images? Should I be thinking about making a PowerPoint presentation or something like that? Think broadly about what strategies are going to best suit what it is you're trying to accomplish, and keeping in mind that there is no definitive list of strategies. I just gave you a handful of examples, but teachers are always inventing new strategies. This is kind of where the play of teaching comes in. So think about your strengths, think about what you like, what you personally find engaging as an audience member, and also think about the times when you've been really bored or the thing has been ineffective, think about all the bad teachers you ever had and like what specifically didn't you like. Think about those things, pick your strategy, and understand that this is where the experimentation from year to year will come in, because you will develop over time if you decide to keep doing this. You will develop your own voice and your own strategies that people will come to know you for. So have fun with this part. In the process of doing all of that, you also want to think about, to the best of your ability, because you won't here have everything you need, but to the best of your ability, while you're doing this, you also want to think about what kind of resources you'll need. So that means the size of the room. Are people going to need to be sitting at hard surfaces? Do they need tables, or will they sit in a ring of chairs? Do you need audio-visual equipment if you're dependent on a laptop, or if you have some kind of music that you want to play, something that you want to show audience members? Just imagine your perfect teaching space, because one of the things that's going to happen when you actually fill out your little proposal for the website for the event is they're going to ask you what you need. So if you know that you have a laptop that needs to be plugged in, or if you know, like with my tarot workshop, I ask, it's ideal if folks have tables to sit at, because it sucks to read tarot cards in your lap. I can work with it, but if they give me the opportunity, I'm going to ask for tables. Just think about what it is that you would need, and think about things like, how big of a class could you handle? Are you thinking about a 10-person workshop? Could you handle 50? These are things to kind of keep in mind. You're not going to know, and a lot of these things you're not going to have a ton of control over them, but knowing is going to help you write a better abstract or a better proposal. And it's also going to help you find events that are going to be the best fit for you. Last thing, mostly last-ish thing. Now that you've figured out your workshop, give it a title, okay? You've thought about your strategies, you've thought about your audience, you've thought about what you need. Now you're getting to the point where on the website, you're filling out the form, you've got the Google Doc or the proposal form, or you're sending the email to the event organizer, whatever it is. Most of the time, what folks are gonna want is a short proposal. And these very often are the exact same descriptions that they're going to use in their program guides. So the best thing that you can do, if you've been to events, dig up all of the old program guides you might have stashed somewhere, or look them up online if they're digital, and read other people's program information, because most of the time that is the thing that got submitted. Maybe it was rephrased a little bit, or they answered some additional questions in some kind of questionnaire about what they would need. But 99% of the time, all you have to actually write is that 100 to 300 words about what it is you're actually going to do. When I write those, I pretend that I am writing the back of a book. And I think about, you flip over the back of a book and it's the little like sexy blurb that's there to designed to get you to buy the book. I pretend that that's what I'm doing when I'm writing these workshop proposals. I write them the same way I would if I was pitching a book or a short story or something like that. So I start out with, imagine, struggling with this thing, or, everybody's been in this kind of situation where they've, wanted to know about whatever, right? Like you write it sexily, right? And then you have another 3 or 4 sentences about how you are answering that problem, right? Or like, so like for my tarot workshop, it says something like, do you have 6 or 7 tarot decks shoved under your bed somewhere that you had all the intention of learning and then just didn't, right? Like I try to imagine scenarios that are relatable and kind of humorous. And then I shift into, like, what if you could actually pull one of those out and give accurate, insightful, fun readings to your friends? Well, here's how you're going to do that. And I hit kind of the high notes of what we're going to talk about. You're going to learn about symbolism without memorization. We're going to talk a little bit about tarot history and strategies to make sure that you don't forget things on the fly. By the time you leave this workshop, you will have done X, Y, and Z. That's really important. You want to tell people what they're going to leave with. Many events will also ask you to submit more than one proposal, because they might really like one of your ideas, but not others. Every time I apply to an event, I send in kind of depending, like 2 to 4 different proposals, and some are really popular, some I'm asked to do repeatedly, others people are like, meh, right? It might just be interesting to me, like me talking about new thought, right? But plan on having more than one workshop developed or proposed so that you can submit all of them. There will very likely be space to submit more than one. It doesn't mean you have to do more than one, although you might end up, I mean, they might have a conversation. I've also been asked to choose like which my favorites are. And then often what events will do is they will look at other proposals they've gotten. So like the tarot workshop that I do, for example, I really like teaching that workshop. It's a lot of fun, but there's a lot of tarot readers. I'm not particularly known for my work with tarot. So when Thorn Mooney appears, I'm usually talking about Wicca, or I'm talking about magic on plateaus or something like that. Thorn Mooney is not known as a tarot reader. So that's not the class that always gets chosen, because there's always brilliant tarot readers who are going to offer brilliant workshops. And nobody wants to saturate the program with too many folks doing the same or similar sort of thing. So just something to keep in mind. Finally, when you hear back, and keeping in mind that this can take several months, people are planning often at least a year in advance for these events. There's a lot of moving parts. The organizers are dealing with a lot, trust me, so be prepared to wait for often several months. But when you hear back, either with like, yay, you've been accepted, or like often tentatively like, hey, we're interested in this thing, but not this thing, could you do this? Be prepared to answer promptly, be courteous, think about building relationships with folks. I think that's really key. The piece that sometimes gets lost in these kinds of, especially larger events, is that we're still operating within kind of this community setting. Pagan, occult, witch spaces are not big. We all know each other. I guarantee all of these conference organizers, they know each other. And you will find yourself building a reputation, whether or not you mean to, as to what kind of presenter you are, how easy you are to work with, how friendly you are. And if you build relationships with these people, keeping in mind that these are fellow practitioners, they're not like scary, faceless people like out in the ether, like they're practitioners like you. When you build good relationships with them, you are more likely to be referred to other events. People might eventually start reaching out to you, and you won't have to go through the same kind of application process. Like, that's a thing that happens. That was happening to me before I started publishing books. So do not underestimate how far just being kind and prompt will get you. That's huge. I know I keep saying it's the last thing, but here's one more. This is just more pep talk, because I want you to submit things, because I want to see new presentations when I go to events. I go to a ton, I've seen a lot, and I love my community of people who go to all of the events, but I don't want to keep watching my friends' workshops over and over again. I already know what they're going to say. I love them. I don't need to go anymore. I want to hear what you have to say. So please submit your shit. The last encouraging pep talk thing I want to say is that the organizer wants to say yes. They want to accept you. They want to get lots of submissions. They want to have a full program roster. So you already have all of this stuff working in your favor. Do not be scared. Do not be shy. You are talking to your community. And if you approach that workshop space with the attitude of, I'm a fellow practitioner, I've experienced these things, I think they're really important, I want to share them with you, and you think of it as a dialogue instead of like your high school teacher from 1998 lecturing at you, and you being bored and hating it. Think of it as an open dialogue with your community, and know that everybody wants you to succeed. The organizer wants you to be there. So let that bolster you. And yeah, I hope to see you at the next few events in the coming 2023.